The oldest and strongest human emotion is fear. And the oldest and strongest type of fear is trepidation of the unknown. When we were children, our parents told us that monsters didn't exist. But we were sure that something was lurking under the bed or in the closet. Fear sees even if our eyes are closed. Welcome to the realm of the arcane. My name is LON STRICKLER. Join me as I examine unexplained creatures, strange manifestations, and remarkable realities. Imagine this next hour as a voyage of discovery to strange lands, seeking not for new territory, but for new knowledge of the supernatural. Come on board as we begin this adventure together. Hey folks, good evening and welcome to another episode of Arcane Radio, where we explore the unexplained, live on Beyond Explanation. I'm your host, LON STRICKLER, coming to you with an cannon shot of historic Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. So, Arcane Radio and Beyond Explanation is made possible by you liking, subscribing, and sharing our programming. The super chat donations are essential for us to continue offering you unique content, and your consideration is very much needed and appreciated. So this week, in a nutshell, it's been pretty busy. Last week I told you about a sighting at O'Hare, and Manuel Navarrete went ahead and did the interview and talked to these folks. There's three of them, and it's a crazy story, and this involves TSA security personnel as well. Apparently, when these three individuals who worked at the United Cargo Company were getting off work about 10:30 p.m., they went out to the parking lot, and they noticed this being standing out about the edge of the tarmac, and now, this is an area of the airport near the Rest Haven Cemetery. This is a place we have talked about before because we have several sightings very close to the cemetery. So I'll get back to that later. But anyway, they saw this being out there and it had bright red eyes. They saw the eyes, all three of them did. And as they were watching, these TSA security personnel started driving up and surrounding it. They had flashlights, headlights, the whole 9 yards. There was a bunch of them. So this thing literally started flapping its wing, unfurled its wings, started flapping its wings, and took off immediately and started circling. Now, for those not familiar with TSA, they don't carry weapons or anything. You know, all they do is run people out of wherever they shouldn't be, and so there's nothing they could have done. They wouldn't have captured it or anything. So, this is just another bit of evidence that, something's being seen out there. So besides that sighting, now today, we received two more reports. One was up in Milwaukee, and Manuel and I think Tobias are going to do interviews on that. And I received one from Racine, Wisconsin, of a gargoyle type being. So I'm talking to the witness tomorrow, and hopefully we can get some more information other than that. Now, an associate and I have been conducting a series of RV and temporal sessions in the hope of finding non-physical evidence in reference to these winged humanoid sightings around Chicago and Lake Michigan. Now, the preliminary findings have been interesting. I have to admit that. It's been very interesting. And, when I mentioned about the Rest Haven Cemetery on the property, we are almost positive that there are several ley lines through this cemetery. Of course, they run underground, the tarmac and all the other paved over areas directly into the city and beyond. So, we're trying to determine if there is possibly vortex activity, portal activity, possibly. This seems to be a very high activity area. We have had a UFO seen above the cemetery that literally had a humanoid type being ascend into it from the cemetery. We've had other small humanoids, possibly ETs, seen in the area as well. So there's been a plethora of sightings around this cemetery. So stay tuned. All I can say is we're looking into it. We're keeping at it. Hopefully, we're going to come up with some decent answer eventually. But of course, this has been very interesting, and is it groundbreaking? Yeah, maybe. So we'll see. Well, anyway, tonight I welcome experiencer and author Anna Maria Manalo, who has written Portal: A Lifetime of Paranormal Experiences. Now, Anna Marie was born and raised in the suburb of Manila, Philippines, where her neighborhood was replete with encounters with beings from other dimensions. As a small child, she came to know the experience, hauntings, and uncanny events that her neighbors and family members had encountered. Now, Anna has been interviewed on several radio talk shows. She also has been involved with the Bucks County UFO investigation as a witness. Some of the most prominent cases she's investigated are part of her book, and she's a screenwriter, has numerous accolades earned from competitions in the U.S. Anna is also an artist and travel photographer. She has traveled over 26 countries, encountering tourists and locals who had the most riveting accounts. Now, she lives with her husband and pets in Pennsylvania. As well, Anna and I are both published by Beyond the Fray Publishing. So, Anna, thank you for joining me this evening.
Hi, Lon. Good evening. Nice to be back on your show.
Well, it's good to have you.
Last time we talked 2 years ago or so.
So how you been?
Pretty good. It's been pretty busy. You had mentioned, interestingly enough, I'm going to pick that up as a jumping off point, that Mothman creature that's at O'Hare that you're currently investigating. I would say the first 24 chapters of my book it involves some type of creature that was actually cited and repeatedly cited. No one knows to this day the nature of it, but I remember when you first mentioned that creature that you're investigating way back in the day. It was rang in my head because a couple who was deeply involved in a creature that was very similar, and in a little village outside of Manila, miles outside Manila, is the flies. They don't know if it's demonic. They don't know if it's Mothman. But it was in my book, the first one that I have. And it entails a gentleman there who, at the time when he was alive, he was a writer. It's a very tragic type of a story. I won't go too deeply into it, but just to let you know that it's seen all over the world, it appears. Mm-hmm. So this is back in the early 60s when it was first seen, way before Point Pleasant, all the other sightings back then. But I don't know if this was a harbinger of future gentleman involved, committed suicide. I don't know if it was multidimensional. Certainly the person that I extensively interviewed, I keep in touch with her until today, has mentioned numerous times that she thought it was demonic.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, are you talking about the Aswang, or are you talking about another winged creature?
No, I'm talking about a creature that had been described to me as a creature that looked like a bat. It had like a 10-foot wingspan from tip to tip. It stood over 7 feet. And the description, which I put in my book, was it had a face of a goat and the eyes of a cow, which, in some parts from the creature that you're talking about today with the red eyes. This one apparently had some type of a yellow eyes with the pupils, that you see in a goat, and then the horns and the long beard. But it kind of like is a combo of I don't know if you remember the mythical creature Jeepers Creepers
Yeah.
with the leathery wings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
This
we've
is they
had several
described,
people.
and accordingly, this thing would show up in the night. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Continue, please.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say that it was described as having leathery wings to window the night. This thing be at the window. And the odd part about this, when people actually approached it with some kind of crucifix or religious article, it would fold into itself, and it was almost, I would say, effervescent is the word I could think of.
I think I lost her. You still there? Oh, well, unfortunately, that has happened. Well, we're going to try to get Anna back. In the meantime, if you guys have any questions in the chat room on anything, please feel free to type it up there and we'll try to get it answered for you. Anyway, let me continue with going on, in the Chicago area. We have had some kind of a lull in sightings, I guess, for about a month or so. There have been a few small sightings around, but as far as with the airport, we this last sighting, and I tell you, this sighting is remarkable because just the fact that there were there were people. Is she back? Are you back, Anna?
Yes, I'm somehow connected. I'm not sure how.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you
Okay,
hear
well, go ahead
me?
with what you were saying.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know how we got disconnected. Um, but it seems to me that there's parallels here. We've got
Okay.
something that people have seen, and in this case of this family that I talk about in my book, apparently there was one witness, and then the wife had seen it a number of times, but she had declined for some reason to collaborate. So
Mm,
eventually, what happened was the gentleman committed suicide thinking he was going crazy. And we're talking over a course of months that he was seeing this creature almost every night when he went up to this study.
mm. Wow.
Now, I don't know if it's multidimensional. It certainly responds to a crucifix, which leads me to believe it could be an infestation of some type.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then she
Possible.
goes on to take, she had, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that she eventually moved in with her mother,
Mm-hmm.
which is 3 blocks away, and the creature followed her.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an account that has gone on for several years. And I followed and tracked this woman's lifetime. And then eventually they emigrated to the US. And then, from what I understand, just 2 years ago, something is now happening in that woman's house. So, whatever it is, if it's an infestation, it's happening to the present day, or at least 2 years ago. Um, I haven't heard if anything has happened recently, but as recent as 2 years ago, there's been some occurrences where rooms start to get cold. It plummets down to like 30 degrees lower than the thermostat. There's kinds of like noises on the walls, knocks on the walls, kind of like your traditional type of haunting.
Mm.
So it's a little
So,
different.
yeah, it is a little different. So, tell me, Anna, what kind of experiences have you had when you were living in Manila and even beyond that?
I had actually some interesting experiences having to do with a neighbor. The person I was talking about was a family, a friend, and a neighbor across the street. But
Hmm.
next door to them, there was a different kind of an experience where we would, when I was a small child, I had a bedroom that faced the street. And long, long ago, in a suburb like this, streets were very narrow. As you well know, it's very tropical. So you have a lot of foliage all around you, but you also had the houses. And because it's a small country, you have one small house right next to each other. Now, on the street, all of the homes have a front gate. And I remember as a child looking out my bedroom window, and there was always, and it always happened at dusk. A lot of these things happen at dusk. And it was always either raining or it was misty. There was something that prevented the sun from coming out. The weather was inclement. And there was this woman who was always sweeping with a broom the front walk right outside the gate of this house. And it was right next door to the house that had all these manifestations. Later on, we found out that before this community came into being during World War II, there was a lot of action. There were a lot of Japanese soldiers that unwittingly ended up dying there, casualties of war. And they were never, their bodies were never exhumed. They just died there.
Mm.
Later on, when they were excavating it, to build, I think there was like a garage with, I'm trying to think of several garages were built on top of two homes that were removed. And this is later on, this is not contemporary day in the 80s. They found bones of people
Mm.
because they were trying to install gas pumps. And in the process of digging, they found bones and they found articles of clothing and they found, I guess like badges or something that was military connected with World War II. And some of them
Hmm.
said they looked like they were symbols, Japanese, with the little red sun and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
So as I'm looking out the window, going back in that day, and this is like in the mid 60s, this woman would be sweeping the front walk, sweeping the front walk. And one day I turned to my grandmother, who happened to be looking out the window with me, wanted me to come back in because it was raining. And I said to her, I've seen that woman so many times. What is she doing? Sweeping her front step in the rain. And my grandmother's face just turned so pale, totally
Mm.
speechless, looked at me, and she said, come on in now. It's getting dark. You shouldn't be looking out there.
Mm.
Come to find out, whatever that was not a human being. I was seeing something of, a ghost of a woman, and she's just sweeping the street. She's just sweeping right in front of her gate.
Mm.
Now that's just one. And then we'd had the one with the little red orbs. I don't know what they were. They would zip around in the sky. It wasn't New Year's Eve. It was one of those things where people would be out walking, because it's a tropical country most of the time. It's nice and warm. People would take walks even later at night, and they would see these things zipping about. And a lot of times I would go out there with, family members, and we would just stroll. And I would look up and I'd say, what are those things? And nobody could explain what they were. But they were like
Mm.
little orbs zipping around in the sky.
Hmm. It's interesting.
We
I
had
mean,
one where the woman, and I believe it's in the book. Go ahead.
no, I was going to ask if you thought it was manifestations of spirit energy, or do you think it was something else?
I have no idea, Lon. I think I might have
Yeah.
been maybe 7 or 8 years old at the time. It
Okay.
wasn't until much later on that, I kind of extrapolated. After I was a UFO investigator, we were probably looking at, UFOs or whatever they're called these days.
Yeah.
But back then, people don't want to admit things like that. They rather dismiss it. They get very uncomfortable. There was one incident where the woman was looking out her window, and this is a very simple one. She goes to bed. It's late at night. She had a very tiring day. She opens her window, and suddenly there's this bright light. I mean, very bright, right outside her window, right above the roof line. And back in the Philippines, the roof line goes way past the window simply because you get monsoon weather, you get rains. You don't want the rain coming in the window. And because they leave the windows open, for ventilation, and back then air conditioning was pretty rare, it was open to the breeze. And she's looking up, wondering, where's this light coming? Right above the roof. She leans over because it's got a casement on it, looking over it. She gets dizzy. She steps back, goes back into the room. Suddenly, she's extremely sleepy. Finally goes to sleep. The next morning, she's got first-degree burns all over her face. She's got a deep tan. Ends up with the doctor. She's got eye problems in both eyes, like something had burned her retina or something. Got radiation exposure. Nobody could explain what it was right above the roof. So they've had incidents like that, and there's UFO groups in the Philippines, but I don't know how developed or how organized they are to this day. I think at some point they realize what they're dealing with because of what they're reading and, what they're watching on YouTube and Ancient Aliens. But back then, it's not, it's a Roman Catholic country, I'd say 99.9%. And there's always some type of more of a religious explanation. If you know what I mean.
That's interesting. When you think about possible radiation poisoning or exposure, the first thing you think is, well, maybe it was a UFO or some type of craft or something that kind of zapped her as she was doing this. But that's pretty unusual.
Mm-hmm. And this must have been, I would say, probably late 60s, I would say. And back in those days, people tend to hide stuff like that. They don't publicize it.
Yeah.
She ended up at the doctor's, explain, why she had that deep tan, why she had the eye infection and everything else. And it's what did you see over the roof?
Mm-hmm.
And they had the house blessed because of it.
Yeah. Was there any other
people,
any other strange activity at that house?
There was a lot of strange activity at that house. There was for lack of a better term, there was a creature that used to sit in the back. It had tattered clothing all the way in the back. In the dead of night, this servant, the houses back then had live-in servants, and this servant was going out to the backyard to get the laundry in, to go ahead, feed the cats. Most households had numerous cats, stray cats, feral cats, you name them. She goes out there, and it's pitch dark. And she's looking for the cats. They're not coming. She's got a plate of food. She leans down, trying to call to them. And right in the middle of this backyard, she sees a man sitting there on the ground, kind of hunched over, looking right at her. And this one, Lon, had red eyes.
Wow.
And she started screaming. She claims the creature looked very gaunt. like it had been starving to death, and it was just looking at her, looking straight at her with like a very gaunt, very narrow face. Now you got to remember the fences there, they're walls. They're not really fences. It's like 7 feet high to keep crooks from coming in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This was no thief.
Well, it had to be a manifestation.
There was no sound. It never ran off.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's just a lot of different things. Sometimes, and it's in my book here, about maybe 150 miles south of Manila, further down, in a vicinity called Laguna. There is a university, and you know, for some of the audience who are Filipino, they might know actually which university this is. It was the site of where the Japanese interned POWs during the war. They took the university, corralled all the civilians, the soldiers, and even some of the priests, and put them in the basement and tortured them. The basement of a gymnasium in the middle of the university campus. So to this day, I am told that if you hazard it, go to the gym after hours at this university, and now you got to remember, this is now a hustle bustle school. I mean, it's got the School of Agriculture, it's got fine arts, it's got architecture, animal husband, you name it, they have it. Okay, it's increased in size, but right in the middle is a gym, and they haven't really attempted to do anything to the basement of the gym, and it's for good reason. Anybody who goes down there, they hear chains because people were chained down there. They hear screams of people being tortured. Um, right above, on the first floor of the gym, it kind of doubles like an auditorium of sorts, where they sometimes have performances. And on this stage, if you were to walk into that gym and it was empty and it was after the sun had set, you would see, and I'm not kidding, okay? I'm glad you're sitting down. You would see a group of Jesuit priests walking around with their, you know, I don't know what you call them, those white things, collars,
Yeah.
and the black cassock, in a circle with no heads on. They're all decapitated.
Well, you know, the Japanese had a habit of doing that. So that doesn't surprise me. I mean, you got to
You're
figure
not supposed to be laughing.
Well, well, you know, I have heard and seen a lot of stuff in my time, but you know, with the POWs and the camps and everything, and some of the horrendous stuff that happened during the war in those POW camps, you know, the residual energy's got to be pretty rife. So the fact that, and we know that Jesuit priests were tortured and killed by the Japanese. So yeah, I mean, you know, that's some strong residual energy. But the fact that you can still see it, yeah, that's pretty profound.
So I actually went into this gymnasium. I flew in. I'm trying to think now. It might have been 2000 and way before the book. The book was published 2017, maybe. So about 10 years before that, I was actually in that gym because I wanted to see for myself, believe it or not. Okay, and I'm I'm not the kind of person that dashes into dark places. And this was not remote. I mean, it's a very busy university now, but I chose to go in there, and it might have been about maybe 9 o'clock at night, around this time. So the sun had already set, and I was with two other people. One happened to be a journalist. So he said, "Oh, I got a university pass. If anybody questions us, I've got this," and so on and so forth. And I had my camera, and the other woman who was with me also, she was kind of like a very curious, but she was the first to run, if anything. And we walked in, and you could hear a pin drop because nobody
Right.
wanted to be there. Like, no one wanted to be. Lon, I tell you, dinner time over there is like 7:30 or whatnot, and the sun usually is still up until about 8:30, but it starts to descend very rapidly, and that's when all these things happen. So you walk in there and talk about residual energy, you could feel the energy start to get very sinister. It starts to kind of plummet the direction of bizarre. And when I was there, one of the things I did first was take pictures of the ceiling. And then I started walking up towards the stage. The stage kind of like is right at the very, very end. And there's now racquetball courts on the one side. There's, all kinds of gym equipment on the other side. And then you have this open space where they put chairs, for performances. All of them have been pulled up. And then you have the stage. And I will send you this as a link after this show.
Oh,
I went up to that stage, Lon, and there were so many orbs. Yep. I mean, orbs.
Wow.
I don't know where they came from. And then I randomly decided she would go up the stage to see if she could feel anything up there. I don't know that she felt anything, but these things were following her. They were right above her head, right behind her, above her. As she was walking around, the orbs were following her. It was creepy.
Yeah.
And then there's the back of the stage. The very back, they threw all kinds of broken furniture to discourage students from going down there.
Jeez. Well,
seriously.
Yeah, I believe you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like I said, that's a pretty profound hauntings, and uh, my guess is the orbs are actual spirit energy of those people who had been there, and the fact that they were following somebody meant they were trying to get somebody's attention for the most part. But the fact that they did have manifestations, if it was residual or even beyond that, or possibly earthbound, I mean, that's pretty creepy. Headless priest. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So
this is what witnesses have told me. I have not seen any of them. I have seen the orbs. I photographed the orbs. Yeah. Did I sense something disquieting? I sensed kind of like I guess what you would say, kind of like a morbidity to the atmosphere.
Right.
Because it was very quiet. You go to a college or a university, people are, out there working out or doing whatever. It was just empty. It was empty. It felt dead, in more ways than one, except for the three of us. We ventured backstage and I took that shot. And, a lot of people said, we'll be very surprised if you didn't see anything when it develops. It's interesting because I still have that picture. I didn't see anything there. I didn't see anything. And then we were told you're not, it's off limits. You can't go down. So you can't go in there. And then in the back, supposedly there's grounds there where people, play basketball. You could see it's overgrown with weeds. You could see that there's all kinds of stuff on there because people haven't used it.
Right.
They're reluctant to use.
I got a question in the chat. from Andrew. He wants to know: have you ever heard of a bagat or bagat?
Have not, but I'm curious what that is.
Yeah, I am too, because I've never heard of that
Is
phrase.
that in Tagalog?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he's going to have to give
We
us an
have
idea
several
what
kinds
that
of
is.
creatures.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't
Yeah,
heard that one
give us some
before.
clues here.
Anyway, what else you got for me? What other strange manifestations come from the Philippines? Because, I've heard
Well,
a lot of different stuff. As far as different creatures and things, and I don't know. You got a lot of different things out of Malaya and Indonesia, and a lot of like the oiling man and all this other crazy stuff. Uh, is there anything like that where they have any of those manifestations of humanoids, or I don't know, some type of people that may be dead or manifested?
I don't know that you could call them humanoids, but there's something that a lot of cryptozoologists would love here.
Mm-hmm.
And he's Squatch or Bigfoot, depending on where you are. We have our own version, and it's
Oh
called
yeah.
a Batand Utan. Long word. Okay.
Okay.
Long ago, it used to be four, but there were these hairy creatures that stood between 7 and 9 feet tall, and they walk bipedal. A lot of people have mistaken them for being gorillas, and they're known to eat people. So you tell me, is that folklore? Okay,
Oh, I don't
it's
know.
interesting how Bigfoot is now becoming
Yeah.
prevalent in the media, and I thought to myself,
Right.
my God, we used to talk about that, and they
Well,
even had a comic strip,
oh, did they?
and it looked like Lon. You look at what was that Gimlin Patterson film? This
You're right.
creature that was walking across. If you believe that film, I mean, I do. It looks like a man, well, wearing some kind of a ghillie suit, right? But in this comic strip, if I could find it, I would send it to you. It looks just like him. And this is back in the 1950s when this comic strip came out.
Interesting.
So yes, we do have our own version of Bigfoot. And then
Yeah,
you
I
heard
never
of
heard.
the
I
Tianak.
heard that
You're
before.
probably familiar with the Tianak.
Yeah. Now
You're
Andrew
breaking up.
said. Yeah, the Andrew said that the bagat is a lungo. You know what a lungo is?
Oh, I would not know that language. See, there's 32 dialects, and I speak Tagalog, so there's like 31 other dialects that I'm not familiar with. But if he could translate it in English, that would help.
Okay. Well, we'll see what we can come up with. Yeah. Well, I am not really familiar with the Philippine crypto or whatever is there. I do remember talking to you when you were here the last time, and we were talking about this. And I think it might have been the first story you talked about, this winged being that the witness was seeing in the picture window. This big winged being.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
is that the same
Mm-hmm.
story? Oh, okay. Interesting.
I think
Well,
the Mothman creature, we were trying to figure out whether it was demonic or whether it was Mothman. But I
yeah,
think I mentioned the Tiyanak to you at that.
yeah.
One was not in the Philippines. This is later on in the book concerning a couple on my trip to Thailand. we were actually going around Chiang Mai, which is kind of like a province in Thailand. And
Mm-hmm.
in that particular area, there's a lot of people who are farmers and tenant farmers, people who will actually live in little huts in the land. This couple had an infant child, and apparently one night they they thought they heard something outside. The husband ventured forth, and then the woman walked out for a few minutes to get some water. And you got to remember, these huts are pretty primitive.
Mm-hmm.
There's no running water at the time. She came back in, and the child was gone. In his place was this creature. It was kind of like a, I don't know how to describe it, but it had fangs and
Mm-hmm.
it had the red eyes. It was not it was not the child. She lost her child, and whatever it was took over. It was lying in the child's crib. So they never did
Wow.
find that kid, from what I understand, until it was time for us to leave.
Mm.
So it was a very tragic, very sad type of situation. But they lived off the land, and apparently they had no choice but to stay there in the middle of this very remote area of the farm. And it
Mm.
was just basically the two of them and the infant in a hut.
I had an account that was sent to me a while back, I guess about 5 years ago. And this was actually in the Filipino press out of Manila about a werewolf-like creature that was actually killing livestock on the island of Sabal. You ever heard anything about that?
Zambales
Yeah,
and
Sambali,
Cambale.
Sibale. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of weird stuff happened out down there. And I'm not really sure whether, I mean, if they're documenting it or they're able to photograph it. But I tend to hear a lot of very unusual
Yeah.
and very odd things. And they are of a cryptid nature.
Hmm.
Because you got to remember, there's stretches and stretches of tropical forest that's down there that have never been explored.
Right.
It's like I remember a while back we went to Mexico, and there's areas of Mexico that are still wild. I mean,
Oh,
so
absolutely.
wild. I mean, United States has a lot of wild, yeah,
Yeah.
but that particular area is wild. They have
Hmm.
small villages, and interspersed between villages, you've got swaths and swaths of wooded areas, tropical rainforest that no one has ever set on.
Hmm.
It's an intriguing story. I wouldn't
Yeah.
want to go down there though.
Well, apparently, from what I'm reading here, during the war, that the Japanese would even go into that island. There was something that was scaring them down there, so maybe it was
Hmm.
something there. Uh, I don't know. I don't know what they saw, but
I bet.
yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. I just came across that, so that's interesting. Yeah, every place has their own type of
Some of them
strange.
came alive.
What's that?
Some of them probably never came out alive, or probably didn't even know the war was over
Well, that's true too. That
because
happened a
it's so
lot.
remote and so removed. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Hmm, hmm. Um, Let me ask you this. Since since the Philippines is heavily Roman Catholic, uh, is exorcism a big thing in the Philippines?
Yes and no. It
Okay.
depends on what kind you're talking about, because there's still places far removed from Manila where they have their own version of exorcism.
Okay.
And when I say that, I'm not talking in the great Roman Catholic sense. I'm talking like, kind of, I hate to say voodoo because it's really not voodoo either. but
It's
it's their
tribal.
kind of brand of spiritism,
Right.
sort of.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they have these rites. They have these I don't know, some of the audience might be familiar with something called anting. It's like they carry a talisman, like a Roman Catholic crucifix would be the
Right.
equivalent of what they would consider a talisman. And they would put that around the person's neck to protect them from whatever evil or whatever curse had
Interesting.
happened to that person. And it's interesting you mentioned that because I just had I was a guest with Paul Bestel about probably 3 weeks ago, and we were talking about curses.
Hmm.
And some of the older folk still believe in the power of a curse. Now, you don't necessarily associate that with the Roman Catholic religion, the idea of a curse. But if you look at the Pentecostal Christians, I don't want to call them Christians. I guess they're
They're
Pentecostal
Christian.
type Christians. They believe, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean
I
they're
didn't hear
Christians,
you.
Pentecostal Christians. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. They believe that you could actually cast a curse on someone, wish them ill, and it whatever if it takes hold, a lot of misfortune happens to the person.
No.
So there's areas in the Philippines where that is believed. Um, and Roman Catholicism, for the most part, does not believe in the power of a curse. So, yes and no, in the sense that if you're out there somewhere where they believe in an exorcism, it could be their kind of exorcism that you're going to be undergoing. Now,
Hmm.
as far as the ones that the Vatican believes in, okay, the one that Ed and Lorraine, with Father McKenna, in the past have done. I don't know that there's any kind of documentation
Hmm.
with the Archdiocese in Manila, if
Hmm.
anything has been done in that direction. I know in the case of the family that I outlined in my book, the one that I researched, I think there were numerous blessings, but I don't think an exorcism was ever discussed.
Okay.
See, these kinds of things people are embarrassed about. They don't want to publicize it. They don't want the neighbors to know as a whole because the family had a reputation. They didn't want people to know there was something going on with their family. So
Right.
to even suggest an exorcism would involve the entire town, would involve the parish, and then everybody would know.
Hmm. Interesting. Hmm.
Now, these days,
Ye-
I don't know how widely accepted that is.
Yeah. Hmm.
It's a good.
Uh, I've also come across the possibility of Fae or Duende in the Philippines. I came across an account that I got a couple of years ago of these Duende. Now, in the Hispanic culture, they call them Duendes, little men, little people. Have you come across any of
Mhm.
those type of sightings?
I've come across a lot of stories about them.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting that you mentioned that because there's also the gnomes and the little mounds of earth that they build in people's backyards. Now, this might surprise you, but in my book, towards the second half, there is an account of a woman who had some kind of, and I don't want to say it's a gnome for sure. I don't want to say it's a dwarf. Whatever it was living in her backyard. And to just give you a clue of how contemporary it was right off the Delaware River
Mm.
in Pennsylvania.
Oh, from where you're from.
So, yeah. And this was just probably, I would say that the book was published in 2017, 2016 is when I gathered information on this situation.
Right.
The brother had seen it. I mean, she obviously, the woman who lived in the house, had seen it. The older brother has encountered it, and whatever it was had followed them as when they went fishing. They went fishing, and it followed them.
Mm.
And it was it looked more like a shadow being. You couldn't really see. You could see the profile, but you couldn't see a hat or anything like that. Kind of like when people say leprechaun. Is it really green, or is it just the way we dress them up because we want them to look less threatening?
Mm-hmm.
In the case of this one, it's like a shadow. It has no direct features. You could see it's there. It's standing in the shadows. When you attempt to approach it, it kind of like dwindles or disappears. So in that manner, it's multidimensional. Well, whatever it was created a mound in her backyard, and no matter how many times they took that mound down, it was like a little hill. There it was again a few days later.
Hmm. Huh. Do you have any idea why they built the mound? Did anybody give any indication why that they did that?
Well, the interesting is when the creature followed the two brothers when they were fishing. Apparently, the creature felt like they were threatened or something, and it followed them, trying to give them a sign not to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
So they went fishing, and the creature stepped up onto the deck of the house that they were in. It was a cabin, and left them entrails of fish.
Mm.
Neither one had gutted the fish, but this
Huh.
creature went up to the top and the top of the deck and left entrails.
Right.
And he said it's a very weird thing because there are no kids in the vicinity. There were no teenagers that would be making fun of this woman. She had a wall around her house, and she had part of the river she had access to, and that's where this mound was,
Mm. Interesting.
right near the river.
We do have a question by
Very
Vincent.
bizarre situation.
He's asking if you have any recollection or reports of giants in the Philippines. Any giant creatures?
Giants.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the only thing I can think of that could be construed as a giant is the ones that live in trees because they're
Okay.
tall, if that's what he means.
Okay.
Otherwise, it would be, what we were talking about earlier with the Bigfoot.
Like the Bigfoot creature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember now. I'm grappling with, tip of my tongue, but it's something that lives in the tree. And they said that late at night, it's kind of like a custodian protecting the forest. So it
Oh,
lives in the
okay.
tree, and it kind of like the tree and disappears and then reappears when something is happening or there's a bonfire nearby.
Mm.
We could use that in the forest fires out here in California.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. I have come across a lot of accounts of what people call leshies, forest guardians and beings. Some of these leshy are large beings. They've actually been seen a lot of different places, U.S. and Europe and stuff. So maybe it's something related to a leshy. I don't know. It's interesting.
How do you spell that?
Leshey, or no, Hy. Leshy. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what the hell it was
Never
either, but
heard of it.
somebody talked about it to me, and I started getting some inquiries about it. So yeah, I went and looked it
Hmm.
up and researched it. Yeah, that's what it's considered to be, a type of guardian or spirit in the woods that will defend it by, if it's
Mm-hmm.
got to kill, it'll kill if it has to. So yeah, I that you know
So good, like fairies. They could be like fairies. Fairies
maybe,
do the
you
same
know,
thing.
yeah, maybe. You know, you were talking about gnomes and such in Pennsylvania. I tell you, I get a lot of sightings here in Pennsylvania. Seriously, I do. I get a lot of
Do
gnome sightings. Yeah, seriously, I do. I mean, even around where I'm in South Central PA, so we get a lot of them around here. Now, I
mm-hmm,
don't know what it's related to. Uh, I have no
mm-hmm.
idea. I mean, we got a little bit of everything around here, but you know, I never even really thought that we
Do
had
they
a.
look like them? Do
Yeah,
they have a hat on
they
and
had a
all
hat
that
and
kind of
everything,
stuff?
though most of them had blue hats as opposed to red hats. I figure
Hmm,
that. Yeah, I don't know.
change.
Yeah, I
Oh
don't know. I never
gosh.
I you know I that surprised me as well. You know, I've heard of I heard a lot of different fae and a lot of little people and such, but you know, being around this area now, some of my colleagues who live in this area may know. Uh, Tim Renner might know about it, but I that's the first I have heard of it. And there seem to be several accounts about bee sightings. So I don't know.
What about that 3 foot tall creature? Well, 3 to 4 feet tall. Knees are connected backwards. You ever hear anybody report that to you?
Yeah, and I forget the name of
Creature.
it, but yeah, I've heard about that. I don't know what that is, but I've heard about that. I forget the name, uh, but there have been sightings of whatever that thing is.
Not far from where I am. Okay, we got a
Yeah.
high school and a middle school nearby.
Hmm.
So I get this call. Sometimes I get calls like out of the blue because the neighbors talk and they all know I'm writing stuff. This
Yeah.
one neighbor calls me up. She says, "I got to give you this number because this woman just told me go ahead and give her my number. She needs to tell you the story herself. Yada yada yada." So this is for the next book, not this book I'm writing, but the one after that. Um, she was apparently picking up her son. He was just out of a game. It was in the afternoon. After school, he had a game, and then he was done with the game. She picks him up, drives out of the school, and heads home. So she crosses a main road, and then she's going through the you know, back streets, and then enters this lane. It's like a one-way macadam at this point. It's narrow.
Hmm.
There's high grass on the left, high grass on the right. And then suddenly her son says, "Mom, stop, look." So she steps on she's surprised. She steps on the brakes, and this thing was crossing the road. It was about 3 to 4 feet tall. It was hair. It looked like it was wearing some kind of tight bodysuit, and it had these long arms, and the knees were on backwards. I mean, it was walking forward, she said,
Hmm.
but the knees were all wrong. Were on backwards, and it clambered down into the grass, into the adjacent field. And I mean, she's looking at it, and the son's like, "Go, go, go!" Like, get the heck out of here! What are you doing? She's like paralyzed, and then finally,
Well, you know, that very well could have been a crawler or walker humanoid. You know, we've been getting a lot of those recently of these white colored, hairless humanoids that got real long, gangly legs and arms. And, you know, we've been hearing about a lot of those. In fact, I'm writing a book about it right now. So, I don't know, maybe that's what that was.
and the strange thing about it is that there was a house. He walked to the field, and the field belonged to the house, but nobody saw it. I mean, I don't
Hmm.
know, late afternoon. It was probably around like 5:30 or something like that, close to dinner time.
Okay.
She saw it, her son saw it, and she says, I saw it plain as day. It wasn't dark enough for me to think that I was hallucinating. And it just went from this side of the road to this side of the road. It went through the grass and it was gone.
Mm,
It's not that far from here.
right.
So, it's the things that people see that they can't explain that still go on in this area.
Mm. Well,
This is the
Anna,
same area where we had a sighting of a huge craft.
yeah, I know the
Sorry,
Bucks
go ahead.
County flap. Yeah, I remember all that, and I know you were involved with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, Anna, I want to thank you for coming on the show tonight, and
I think that's the first time I met you.
I think it is. I really do. I think that is. So thanks again for coming on, and we'll get you back another time and see if when you write your next book, we'll bring you on and have you talk about it.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right.
Okay. Well, you
I think
take
we
care and
went
you have a
over.
nice weekend. Okay.
Sorry about. Okay, you too. Bye.
Okay. Bye bye. Now, if you have an unexplained encounter or sighting, feel free to contact me through the Families and Monsters blog site. I want to again thank Anna Maria Manalo for joining me this evening, and thanks to each and all of you for watching and chatting. Now, if you made a super chat donation, it's truly appreciated. Thank you. And your support is what makes this possible. So please like, subscribe, and share. Now, next week, you got a 14 Friday show, and we will have Amy Boo and Vincent Richardson joining me. And we're going to be talking about a whole lot of different stuff. So make sure you join us. And until next week, stay healthy. Have a safe and enjoyable weekend. Good night.